Philemon. Philemon is Paul's shortest letter in the New Testament, but it's also one of the most personal of his letters. In all probability, this letter to Philemon was sent at the same time as Paul's letters to the Colossians and the Ephesians. We've already explored the connections between Ephesians and Colossians, but notice that a person called Archippus is mentioned in both Colossians and Philemon. Paul sends greetings from Epaphras in both letters. He also sends the greetings of Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, and Luke in both. So if Colossians and Philemon were, as seems likely, sent at the same time, then Philemon was written in around about 61 to 62 AD, and probably from Rome. Remember, this was Paul's first imprisonment in Rome. As with Ephesians and Colossians, it's clear from the letter itself that Paul's in prison, or at least under house arrest. He writes to Philemon about being in chains for the gospel. And we've met Epaphras before from the letter to the Colossians. Remember, he's the founder of the church at Colossae. He's a member of Paul's missionary team and was probably from Colossae himself. We've also worked out from Colossians that he was with Paul when he wrote that letter. But what we discover here in Philemon from verse 23 is that Epaphras was Paul's fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus. It seems that Epaphras was also under arrest in Rome because of the gospel. The recipient of the letter is an individual called Philemon. From his name, it seems that he was probably a Gentile. And he's probably living in Colossae, as Paul writes. We don't know where Philemon has met Paul previously. Maybe in nearby Ephesus. He's clearly a wealthy man who may have met Paul on a business trip. We don't know for sure. Whatever the details, it's clear that Philemon came to faith through Paul's ministry. And so Philemon is a committed Christian. We see that a church meets in his home. And from the letter, we see that one of his slaves, a man by the name of Onesimus, has run away. He's maybe stolen from Philemon too. But on the run, it seems that Onesimus has met up with Paul in Rome and he's come to faith. And so Paul sends him back to Philemon as a new man and as a repentant one, along with his letter. In the letter, Paul asks Philemon to take Onesimus back, not simply as a slave, but as a brother in Christ. He asks that Onesimus be reinstated and forgiven. Paul urges Philemon to have Onesimus back for good. It's interesting to note that Onesimus is mentioned in Colossians chapter 4, verse 9, in the company of Tychicus, the bearer of the Colossian letter. Another clue, I think, to the fact that both of the letters are being sent at the same time. This letter shows that the gospel not only unites Jewish and Gentile believers in Christ, like Paul and Philemon, it also unites believing slaves and masters in Christ, like Onesimus and Philemon. They were now brothers in the gospel. We see here that the gospel not only overcomes racial barriers, it overcomes social barriers too. Paul has one final request to make of Philemon. He asks him to prepare a guest room for him, verse 22. He hoped to be released from captivity in answer to the prayers of God's people. Please notice at the end of your notes a possible outline of Philemon.